All right, we're still looking at rational equations. So again, an equation looks like this. It's got the ratios. That's what makes it rational. Today we're going to look at example from your homework, number 17. In the end, you will get a quadratic answer. We're going to look at what that means and how to deal with it. So, again, when we first look at a rational equation like this, we notice the denominators, n squared, n, and 2n. Think about what those factors are. N squared is n times n. N alone is just n. 2n is 2 times n. So your least common multiple would be 2n squared. Now again, we could multiply all of these by 2n squared, and then just kind of cancel pieces out. But at the same time, I also want you just to think, why don't we just multiply everything by what it's missing? So in the first piece here, to make this say 2n squared, we're just missing a 2, so just do times 2. Times 2, top and bottom. Same thing in this middle piece. It's missing both a 2 and another n. So times another 2 and times another n. This piece, the 2n, it's just missing another n. So times n would make this n squared. Take all of this and times it by n. Okay, it's the same idea as taking this least common multiple and timesing it by everything on top, because in the end, 2n squared, well, the n squared and this n squared would cancel out. That just leaves us with the 2 anyway. Okay, now I'll show you it does the exact same thing when we do it this way. This equation would now turn into 2 times 1 makes the 2. 2 times 2 times n makes 4n. 5n plus 5 all times by n makes 5n squared plus 5n. Now, we are leaving them all over the same 2n squared, 2n squared, 2n squared. Now, technically, the only reason these denominators are here is to show us the excluded value. N cannot equal 0. If n was 0, 2 times 0 times 0, that would come out to a 0. We'd be dividing by 0, and you can't divide by 0. So we need to remember this excluded value, n cannot equal 0. That is important. Other than remembering that n can't equal 0, this bottom is no longer important. We can get rid of it. We are no longer looking at that. Thus, our equation has changed to just the numerator pieces. 2 equals 4n plus 5n squared plus 5n. Okay, again, just these numerators right here. And again, don't forget, n cannot equal 0. Now, I can combine like terms on this side, in which case it would say 2 equals 5n squared plus 9n. The 4n and the 5n combined to make a 9n. Now, I have an n squared term. I'm going to separate out my terms. An n squared term here. I have an n term, like an n to the first power, and just a constant term. Now, yes, they're on different sides of the equal sign, but no matter what, doesn't matter what side they're on, none of these can combine, right? They're all different terms completely. Constant, n squared, n. We're not going to be able to combine them, so we're going to subtract this 2 from both sides so that it says 0 equals 5n squared plus 9n minus 2. Now, we've turned this into a quadratic form. That's what we were talking about before with a quadratic answer. It is now a quadratic form because we have a variable squared plus the variable piece and the constant piece. 3 different terms set equal to 0. To figure that out, we use our quadratic formula, which I've put here to remind you. Now, in this case, we are calling it x. In our problem, it's not x, we're actually calling it n. But it's the exact same formula, the exact same process. N equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that over 2 times a. All we need to do is just figure out our a, b, and c values and plug them in. So, In this case, our b value was 9, so negative 9. Our b value again was 9, so 9 squared is 81. Minus 4 times a times c, so 4 times a is 5. C is negative 2. All over 2 times a, which is 2 times 5. Okay, this was my first step, or my first piece, in setting it up to solve. Now, I just keep going through and simplifying. 2 times 5 make 10 on bottom. 4 times 5 is 20, times a negative 2 is negative 40. When you are minusing a negative, it's like adding. So it's like we're adding 40. So this is what my simplified quadratic formula says. I'm going to simplify it even more. 81 plus 40 is 121. I'm going to simplify it even more. Square root of 121 is 11. At this point, I have two answers kind of hidden away here. What this is saying is negative 9 plus 11 and then divided by 10. That's one of my answers. So 1. And negative 9 minus 11 and then divided by 10. That would be my second answer. So let's figure that out. Negative 9 plus 11 would come out to 1, and then you leave it over 10. So it says 1/10. So our first answer should be 1/10. Now if I do the exact same process, I'm going to get rid of this. Negative 9 minus 11 would come out to a negative 20. Now if I do negative 20 divided by 10, negative divided by positive would be a negative answer. 20 divided by 10 would be a 2. So our other answer should be a negative 2. This means we actually have two answers to this rational equation, 1/10 and negative 2. The last thing we need to remember was this excluded value. I'm going to bring it all the way down. N cannot be 0. Let's double check. Was either of our n values 0? No, it was not. So these are your two answers, 1/10 and negative 2.